Rod Fleming in the Philippines here. Now, to continue our series on autogynephilia, I want to discuss the three sexual profiles that can occur in it. Blanchard actually called these sexualities, but I don't like that word in this context. They all have the same sexuality. They're all male. No autogynephilic, no autogynephile is a woman. They're all men. They all have male sexuality. It just appears in different ways. So let's look at them. Now, the other thing to remember at this point is that Blanchard's primary research was now done 30 years ago. And some things have changed. We're seeing a difference in profiles amongst what you might call the trans community in the West. To what extent that really makes a difference is moot. But that difference is there. In Blanchard's sample, he found that 60% of his respondents, and remember these were people who were approaching Blanchard because he basically was the gatekeeper to transition surgery, to GRS. And he was assessing people to see whether they were suitable candidates for GRS. Now, I personally disagree with some of the things that he did and said, but in terms of his typology and his description of autogynephilia, he couldn't have been more right. He was bang on the money. Anyway, looking back at these original figures, so it's slightly modified in later studies, but not substantially. 60% of them retained a completely heteronormative male standard heterosexual desire for women. They wanted to have sex with women, and that was that. Now, because of the nature of autogynephilia, psychologically, they kind of desire to turn this into some sort of lesbian act. And certainly if you read, and you all should read, Anne Lawrence's collections of narratives, you'll find them talking about how they couldn't have sex with their wives unless they imagined themselves to be women and all that sort of thing. That's not lesbianism. That's a man with a mental disorder trying to accommodate it, right? He's trying to put what could you call them? Mental fixes, workarounds in place to try and get around the fact that he's actually a man, right? With autogynephilia. So the first type, and the most common type, certainly in the West, and we're going to discuss elsewhere later, certainly in the West, is the standard heteronormative heterosexual type. These are men who appear to be women, but they like to have sex and they pursue sex with women. Now, the second type, which in Blanchard accounts for about 20%, was what he called analoerotic. And he didn't invent that word. It is a standard word. And it just means someone who doesn't have sex with other people. Now, sometimes people have read this to mean asexual, but that, first of all, that is an extremely contentious word, right? Very contentious. I'm not persuaded that asexuality actually exists in any kind of scientific sense. It might have a meaning in a sense of practice, is that you just don't have sex, but you're still a sexual person. And analoerotics, they don't have sex with other people, but the reason for that is that the autogynephilia itself is a sexual reward system. So if they're living as women, or even being accepted as women by those around them, or even if people are just playing lip service to the idea that they're women, then that's actually a sexual hit, right? Every time an autogynephile uses a woman's toilet, sexual hit. Every time she uses a women's changing area, sexual hit. Every time she does something that she considers to be, womanly, sexual hit. Anytime people accept her as a woman in any way whatsoever. And remember, you might be talking about somebody who couldn't pass on a dark night in the pouring rain. But people are nice. We're all like that, unless you're Ben Shapiro. But most people will say, call them by the appropriate pronouns and say, ma'am and she and so on. And it's just because, why would you go out of your way to deliberately be unpleasant to someone? I don't think any of us should do that. I think we should accommodate some of these things, but not in a way that causes damage. We need to be reasonable about it. But I don't think that calling someone, in a wig, botched makeup and a dress, who's 6'2", she is really that dangerous to society. I really don't think that the world will collapse because of it. And so basically I'm again this idea of being downright bloody offensive to people. So that's your anaerotics. They don't have sex with other people, but that's because life for them is one big long coitus, basically. Everything they do is about sex, and so they don't require the reward that would come from actually physically having sex. And in addition, there's a problem here, because remember that there are two people here. Well, there's one person and a pseudo-person, okay? There's the host, who's male, and he's created, we discussed this, an autogynephilic artifact, who is kind of pseudo-feminine, pseudo-female almost. It thinks it's female, it thinks it's a woman, but it's a made-up. It's made up of bits of the man's character that he sort of cobbled together to create this this romantic and sexual target for himself. Excuse my catch at that time of month, you know. And that is what this is all about, you know. He's focused on this, but it's not a real woman, you know. So that's something to be aware of. Going along the line slightly further, we get to pseudo-bisexuals. Pseudo-bisexual autogynephiles, again, they account for about 20% in the West. A pseudo-bisexual autogynephile, okay, will have or will pursue, or at least will appear to pursue, sexual relations with men. Now, in some cases, these won't actually be consummated. You'll find that they'll go out in public dressed as women. Now, it's critical to understand that they only ever do this when they're in role as women. These are heterosexual men. They have never had any interest in men whatsoever prior to the point at which they started to present as women. And it's only when they're presenting as women that they are pseudo-bisexual. Okay? It's an affirmation process. So what they might do, in the simplest form, is they will go out to places where men congregate, dressing up, by their lights looking sexy, and they'll hope to attract attention from men. But this type frequently will then reject any real attention, because underneath it they're heterosexual men, so they reject approaches from men, obviously. The ones who are slightly more intensely autogynephilic, they may well have sex with men, but some, again reading Anne Lawrence, they'll tell you that they only ever did it once. They did it once and that was it. That proved to me that I was a woman. I could take a man. And after that, no. They reverted to their normal sexuality, which was heterosexual. They pursued women. Some pseudo-bisexual autogynephiles become perhaps almost completely androphilic, attracted to men. In the West, that's actually quite rare, but they do exist. And these will be, quite often they're actually the most passing end of autogynephilia. They actually don't look at all bad as women, and they actually can attract men, right? And so they start to enjoy it, they start to actually appreciate it, they go, wait a minute, this isn't just a fake, these guys really do like me as a woman. And what actually is happening here is that the autogynephilic artifact is just getting stronger. I mean, she's getting an affirmation. Sex is the most affirmative thing that humans can do. It's absolutely massive. If you have sex in a certain way and you like it, that you'll have it again. You'll do it again. There's no doubt about it, right? And that's how so many sexual fetishes and hang-ups actually arrive, is that people are experimenting and they go, "Ooh, hey, wait a minute, I like that," and then it gets out of control. It doesn't remain part of a normal spectrum of sexual behaviour. It becomes the obsession, and to an extent, that's what's going on in autogynephilia generally. It's basically a mania. It's a mania that's got completely out of control. But in this particular case, the pseudo-bisexual who has become completely androphilic, and yes, they do exist, they're more common here in Asia, I'll discuss them in a minute. This person will repeatedly try to pursue sex with men. She'll see men as conquests. Remember, she is actually a man, so she's target-oriented in exactly the same way as men are, and she'll see sex as in a competitive way, exactly the same way as men do. We'll talk about relationships with people like this in another piece, but you do need to understand that this person isn't really... she's not responding to men in the way that a woman would. I mean, maybe she's having sex with men, but it's not the same as the way a woman has sex with men. Or for that matter, it's not the same as the way an HSTS has sex with men. It just isn't. There's always a conflict. There's always, you're talking about someone who is actually a heterosexual male, right? And has managed to suppress his natural revulsion to the act of sex with a man, or revulsion to masculinity, which all men have, sufficiently so that his autogynephilic alter ego can take her pleasure in sex. But there's still a conflict. It's not the same as a woman. If a woman loves a man and she makes love to that man, it's something she wants to do and it's open, then she takes him completely. You know what's happening. And exactly the same with an HSTS. Sex with an HSTS is extremely rewarding because she gives herself completely. With an AGP, that never happens. It just doesn't happen. So that's the three types. You get the heterosexual type, the analoerotic type, and the pseudo-bisexual type. Now, all of these are men with various variations of a paraphilia. And this can, in some cases, I think it's quite reasonable to call this a mania. There's a point at which it gets completely out of control. And it's a disorder. When things get to the point, when anything gets to the point where your ability to live your life in any kind of reasonable fashion becomes compromised, then you're looking at a disorder. And it's an old word and it's not used much now, but I would call it a mania. This one is one where they become completely obsessed with this idea that they're women, and they can't stand, autogynephilians can't stand any knockback. They can't stand any contradiction of the idea that they're women. I mean, you get people who, nobody in their right minds would say, well, you're a woman. And yet they will insist so hard. I say, the story of Zoe Turr and Ben Shapiro. Now, Shapiro's a wee naff, he's a smart arse. And nobody likes a smart arse, so that's fair enough. But Turr's reaction to him was typically autogynephilic. That man's a bully. He was a naff who was asking for it, but the Turr's reaction was bullying. It was masculine and bullying. It wasn't a feminine reaction at all. And one of the problems you have across the whole range of autogynephilia is this one, which is that there's a real conflict here, because the better looking, that is, the more passable. And we'll talk about passing privilege and their political concerns about it in another one. They're irrelevant here. But the more passing a trans woman is, the more likely she is to attract male attention. Unless, however, she is in that last 20% of pseudo-bisexuals, she will resent those approaches, right? She wants to look like a woman, but she doesn't want to be attractive to men in the way that a woman is. And so these are the ones who will call men chasers and various other epithets that they dig up. If you talk to and I remember seeing an interview online, I can't remember the names, but it was a cracker, and they'd interviewed a few HSTS and AGPs about what they thought chasers were. Now, I don't think they actually realised what they were, whether they were AGP or HSTS, but they'd managed to get some HSTS in their sample. And I remember this one girl, HSTS, very pretty brunette, kind of Hispanic looking, and they asked what constitutes a chaser, and she said, that would be a man who's had sex with a lot of trans women. And the interviewer said, well, how do you mean? What's a lot? And he said, 1,000 or more. Which should really tell you something, The last thing an HSTS is going to blame a man for or shame a man for is expressing sexual interest in her. Believe me, it never happens, Even if the guy is really pretty noxious and horrible, she's not going to be offensive about it. She's just going to say no thanks, But the AGPs, because it's what's happening is that their male revulsion of masculinity is triggered because they are men. Okay, so there you go. That's the three sexual profiles. But underneath all of them, understand this: all autogynephiles are men. And even the ones that are looking really, really good, and you do see that in Southeast Asia. You know, there are autogynephilic trans women here who are stunning, really stunning. Love Marie Ina, she was on Rui Mariano's show the other day. Rui's an HSTS, and you immediately see the difference because, you know, the scale difference is obvious. But I mean, she's a very beautiful woman. There's no doubt about that. You know, you can't. It would be churlish and rude to suggest anything else. Many of these girls are stunning. That doesn't mean they're attracted to men. Okay? It may well be that they're not. In Asia, it was often thought, and people who didn't understand Asia said that there were no autogynephiles here, and actually about half the trans women in Southeast Asia are actually autogynephilic. What they didn't understand is that there's real cultural pressure here to having sex with men. It works like this, you know, if you're a feminine boy, for whatever reason, in the Philippines anyway, you're a bakla, and a bakla is supposed to have a boyfriend, right? And a bakla having a girlfriend, you're breaking the rules here. All baklas are expected to have boyfriends. That means all autogynephiles are expected to have boyfriends, because autogynephiles here, they transition much earlier. Whereas until recently anyway, the norm in the West was for them to transition over about the age of I think the median age was 43, very rarely under the age of 30. Well, most autogynephiles here transition before they're 20. I mean, they're perfectly normal boys until they're about 15 or 16, and then suddenly, bang, they're wearing a frock, and the next thing you know, they're on the moans, they're growing their hair, they call themselves baklas, they're entering in beauty pageants, they're trying to get jobs in cabaret. And like I say, these girls can be pretty astonishing to look at. You know, you're talking about girls who could be as tall as I am, but slender, and you add some well-placed silicone and treat that with hormones for a couple of years, and add in the fact that Asians, and I don't care whether this is politically correct or not, Southeast Asians are much more gracile in their bone structures, that is, they're much more delicate in their bone structures than Caucasians, and you've got some pretty damn hot women. Seriously. Anyway, that's enough for that one. Bye for now.